basically, it feels like we live in very difficult times. I mean, we're nonstop bombarded by negative news. You have global warming, Syrian conflict, Euro debt crisis, sovereign debt crisis. And if you look at the mood in Europe today, it's basically very morose, and the prospects seem dire. And so the general consensus is actually that things are bad, and the only question is, how bad are things going to be? And the thing is, I have great news for you. We're actually not headed for this dire negative future. The future is wonderful, and I want to explain to you why. Now, before I do that, let's take a step back to the late 1970s, where they seem to mark the end of the world for the Western civilization. I mean, we'd suffered from 2 oil shocks. We had stagflation with unemployment and inflation above 10% in most of the West. The Shah had fallen in Iran, the US had lost Vietnam, the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan, and the Club of Rome was making dire announcements that we're going to run out of oil and most natural resources in 40 years. So 40 years ago, no one predicted that in the next 40 years we'd see democracies across Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Southern Europe, that 1 billion people would come out of poverty in the last 40 years. 650 million people came out of poverty alone in China. This is the greatest creation of wealth in the history of humanity, completely transforming urban landscapes. We had inflation and unemployment fall dramatically. We've seen our lives completely revolutionized by cell phones, tablets, the internet, computers. And if you look, on a longer time horizon, over the last 100 years, every few years you have recessions. Over a 20, 30, 40 years, you have greater crises like the Great Depression. And yet, over a 130-year time frame, these events only are marked as blips in a story of unadulterated economic growth. In fact, over the last 100 years, you've had life expectancy that doubled, childhood mortality that divided by 10. You've had GDP per capita on a global basis multiplied by 3. The cost of food, communications, transportation is divided by 10 to a factor of 1,000. In fact, we've actually redefined what poverty means. If you think of poverty today in the US, 99% of the people have running water and electricity in a toilet. 95% have a television, 88% have a cell phone, 70% have a car. These are luxuries that were unimaginable to the wealthiest of people 113 years ago. We're also living in actually the most peaceful time in history. When you're seeing all the news about Syrian conflict, you wouldn't believe it. But yet, not only in the last 100 years, but at any point in history, we have fewer deaths from wars than ever before. Now, what I'm here to tell you is that this is not something that just happened and it's over. These changes are continuing to this day. Now, when historians actually look back at the last 10 years and think through what are the most important facts of the last 10 years, I don't think they're going to be focusing on the Euro crisis or the Iran and Afghanistan wars. In fact, it's the amazing rise of Africa. 6 of the top 10 fastest growing countries in the world in the last 10 years have been African. And the forecast for 7 of the top 10 to be in Africa. Also, there are many countries like Estonia that are showing the way and how you can apply existing technologies today to transform areas of the economy that haven't yet been touched by the technology revolution, especially public services, education, and healthcare. In Estonia, in 2011, 24% of people voted at the last elections online. 93% of people pay their taxes online. You can set up a company online in a few minutes. All the medical records are online. All the school homework and records are online. And this is using existing technology. And it's made the state much more efficient. Now, beyond that, entire industries are currently being changed by technologies that are currently in the labs or in the early phases of development. And I want to tell you what's going to change the next 10 years in all these industries. In manufacturing, 3D printing is not only revolutionizing prototyping, but little by little is being integrated in traditional manufacturing processes to change them wholesale. 25% of the output of 3D printers today are already production-ready items. And you're seeing its potential as well in medicine as the printing of a mini kidney shows. So it looks like within 10, 15 years, we're going to be able to print kidneys based on our own genetic type to avoid rejection issues and basically eliminate completely the organ shortage. Medicine is also being revolutionized. Watson, which is the IBM supercomputer that famously won Jeopardy, is actually already better at diagnosing certain types of cancers than doctors are. Now, it makes sense. The computer doesn't get bored. It doesn't get tired. It'll look at every millimeter of an MRI or an X-ray. And granted, Watson costs $23 million to build and develop, but today's $23 million supercomputer is actually tomorrow's $100 cell phone. We're actually 5 to 10 years away, probably actually 5 years away, from having a Star Trek type medical tricorder, $100 or multi-$100 device that is a smartphone size, that it can actually detect most illnesses better than a doctor. And you can imagine how it's going to completely transform the relationship people have with doctors, the role of doctors, and the role it's going to play, especially in places like Africa. Education is finally coming into the computer age. You have schools that are testing basically gamified curriculum in the US, where basically the student has curriculum exactly at their level with continuous testing, and so they have to be engaged. They can't be talking to their neighbors because they're being challenged on a permanent basis. At the same time, schooling is finally becoming scalable as you have the best professors at places, at the MOOCs like Udacity or Coursera, with hundreds of thousands of students. And if you want, education is moving from being a one-time event where you do it and you graduate from college and that's it, to a lifelong endeavor, where people of all ages, sexes, religions, anywhere in the world can basically start accessing these online courses and keep improving themselves over time on sites like Khan Academy or Code Academy. Transportation is on the verge of revolution. People wouldn't believe that 20, 30, 40% of trips are going to be completely self-driven in the future. But the reality is every year we lose $121 billion a year in the US to congestion. We have 1.2 million deaths globally from 50 million accidents, so, which are causing untold economic costs in addition to the cost in human lives. And yet, we already have the technology to actually have completely self-driving cars. And the Google technology with radars, et cetera, costs about $100,000 per car. But again, with Moore's Law, it's going to be ubiquitous. And it's to the point that within 10 years, maybe 30 or 40% of the trips will be completely self-driven. Even Elon Musk at Tesla announced that he wants to build a car within 3 years that will drive itself all automatically for 90% of the trips now. He's somewhat optimistic and hyperbolic, so it might be 4 or 5 years, but this is inevitable. And the technology is already starting to seep through in other forms. You're starting to see already self-parking systems and automatic braking systems. Communications is completely being revolutionized. It makes a lot of sense for Google to be working on Google Glasses because it looks like smartphones will probably disappear. You actually already have in the labs brain reading technology where you can recreate the image that people are seeing from their brain directly in the scanner. Now today it's low resolution. You can project your thoughts into a screen. You can actually fly a plane with your thoughts alone. But imagine that 10 years in the future where you have your smart glasses, maybe not with a screen, but with like lasers writing on your retina, overlaying the image and the information on your traditional visual field, and you can actually control them with your thought. Open a web browser, send a text message. And so you'll have basically augmented telepathy. Now this sounds like Singularity-esque or inconceivable, but remember, 10 years ago, you didn't have a smartphone. You weren't spending all your time browsing the web, et cetera. And this is already in the labs, and it's just the next evolution of the, if you wanted, the smartphone. Ultimately, we're probably going to have brain-to-brain, technology-augmented brain-to-brain communication. And this summer, you had the first example of it. Now, that's not in the next 10 years. It's probably in the next 15, 20 years. What's making me maybe the most optimistic is that revolution going on in energy. People are saying that we're going to be running out of energy, but the concept is ludicrous. Every 12 minutes, we get enough energy from the sun to power our economy for an entire year. The issue is not abundance, it's accessibility. And solar has been following a slow Moore's Law curve where it's been improving 14% a year for the last 40 years, and it looks like it's going to continue improving like that. And so the cost per watt went from $70 in the 1970s, 74 cents this year. So we're at grid parity right now in remote places. We're going to be at grid parity in sunny places by 2025 and around the world by 2035. And so that means that with no subsidies, with no government intervention, with nothing, we're basically going to migrate completely from a carbon-based economy to a solar economy by the middle of the 21st century. And when that happens, you can start wasting energy. And when you can start wasting energy, wonderful things happen. The same way that with your cell phone, you can waste processor cycles and you can throw birds at pigs. All of a sudden, things like water shortages go away because you can desalinate salt water, and so you can have unlimited fresh water. And so the concept of water wars makes no sense, especially given that we have 70% of this earth is covered with water. At the same time, food shortages go away because you can start using that water to grow crops in the desert. And so basically, we're living extraordinary times, and we're very privileged here as entrepreneurs and as investors to actually be making this world of tomorrow, a world of equality of opportunity and of plenty. Thank you.